Welcome, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for today's explainer on the psychology of procrastination. Today, we're unraveling the fascinating neuroscience behind a behavior let's be honest, we all know a little too well, delaying the exact things we know we need to do. We're going to map out exactly what's happening inside your head when you put things off, and trust me, it is way more complex than just simply putting things off. So I want you to picture this. You've been staring at a critical task for, 20 minutes? You know what matters. You know the deadline is very real. And yet, almost automatically, your fingers reach for your phone instead of the keyboard. Why do we do this? Why do we completely self-sabotage right when we need to focus the most? Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1, the myth of laziness. The very first thing we need to do is just completely shatter a widespread misconception. Procrastination? It's not a character flaw. It's not about being lazy, and it's definitely not a moral failing. There's this landmark research by psychologists Fouja Sirois and Timothy Peichel, and it reveals a massive paradigm shift. Basically, procrastination is fundamentally an emotion regulation problem. It is not a time management problem. When you avoid a task, your brain isn't choosing to be lazy. Actually, scratch that. What it's really doing is attempting short-term mood repair. If a task triggers anxiety, boredom, or, self-doubt, your brain literally immediately looks for a way to escape that discomfort right now. And that brings us to this built-in cognitive bias called temporal discounting. So your brain assigns way less value to rewards or consequences the further away they are in time. A deadline that's 3 weeks away, it feels completely weightless to your brain, almost abstract. But the instant dopamine hit of a phone notification, that feels urgent and super rewarding right in this very second. It's just evolution wiring us to prioritize the immediate present for survival. Part 2, the neural tug-of-war. Knowing that we inherently prioritize the present, let's look at the actual biological mechanism driving this delay. Because there is a literal conflict happening inside your head between two very different brain systems. It's like a giant tug-of-war. On one side, we've got the amygdala. That's your brain's rapid threat detector. It processes fast, intense emotion and flags uncomfortable tasks as an actual threat. On the other side is your prefrontal cortex, or the PFC. This is the logical center handling long-term planning and impulse control. It acts as the brake. The problem here, the amygdala is incredibly fast. It fires before you even consciously think, while the logical prefrontal cortex is just way slower to engage. Now, what's really fascinating is how these brain structures physically interact. Brain imaging studies have actually shown that people who chronically procrastinate often have a larger amygdala volume. Plus, they have a much weaker neural connection between the amygdala and the DACC, which basically acts as a mediator. So not only is their internal threat detection system sending a much louder danger signal, but the neurological brakes meant to override that signal are measurably weaker. And this dynamic is profoundly amplified for those with ADHD. Neuroscience shows us that having ADHD doesn't mean you have a more reactive amygdala. Rather, you have lower baseline dopamine and norepinephrine. This produces an even weaker prefrontal cortex brake. So telling someone with ADHD to just push through and start is honestly neurologically unhelpful. You're basically asking a smaller, under-resourced neural muscle to lift a massive weight. Part 3, the dopamine trap. To truly understand why we avoid tasks, we have to talk about dopamine. And we need to correct a massive popular myth here. It is not simply the pleasure chemical. Neuroscientists Kent Berridge and Terry Robinson prove that dopamine is really about the wanting, right? The motivation to pursue rewards. And this wanting can diverge entirely from the liking. Dopamine basically creates a neurochemical bias for immediate rewards. When a task feels hard, dopamine drops. When you look at an easy distraction, dopamine spikes. It draws us to endlessly scroll our phones because it calculates an easy payoff, even if we feel super guilty and don't actually enjoy the scrolling at all. And this brilliantly illustrates why so much standard productivity advice just completely fails. Procrastination is not a willpower failure. Your prefrontal cortex is a depletable resource. Time management tools don't fix it because calendars absolutely cannot regulate an amygdala treating work like a physical threat. And those trendy dopamine detoxes that just cut out pleasure, they miss the mark entirely because the issue is the motivational wanting signal, not the actual enjoyment. Part 4, the procrastination paradox. Now, let's pivot to a truly surprising twist in the research. If procrastination is delaying things to avoid emotional discomfort, what do you call the compulsive urge to do things too early, even when it takes way more effort?
Well, in 2014, researchers led by David Rosenbaum discovered this pretty much by accident. They asked university students to carry a bucket down an alley. They could pick up a bucket near the start or a bucket near the end. Shockingly, most students chose the bucket closest to the starting line, even though it meant carrying a heavy object for a much longer distance. They literally chose extra physical work just to get the task started. This is called procrastination.
Think of it kind of like carrying groceries from the car. You could take multiple easy trips, but instead you load 10 heavy bags onto your arms, risking dropping the whole shebang, just to get it done in one single trip. We frequently overtax ourselves physically or mentally just to feel the immediate relief of checking something off our list sooner rather than later.
We actually see procrastination all the time. It's answering an email the absolute second it arrives without really thinking it through, or paying a bill weeks early instead of letting that money earn interest in the bank. It's totally tied to the mere urgency effect, where we choose less important tasks with short deadlines over actually important tasks with long ones. Get this, even pigeons have been shown to peck early in experiments, anticipating a task switch when they totally didn't need to.
So the crucial point is this: why do we pre-procrastinate? It's because maintaining an intention, remembering that you have to do something later, is incredibly taxing on your perspective memory. We rush to complete tasks not just to get them done, but to unload our working memory. We are literally trading extra physical effort or making suboptimal choices just to clear out our mental workspace.
Part 5. Rewiring the brain.
Okay, so we've got the amygdala forcing us to delay and our working memory forcing us to rush. How do we actually take back control? Let's look at some clinical, evidence-based solutions to override our biology. The first tool is the neural pause protocol, which is designed specifically to interrupt the autopilot of the amygdala. Step 1, pause for 5 seconds to interrupt that dopamine spike. Step 2, name the emotion out loud, which forces your logical brain to engage. Step 3, notice the trade-off you're making between right now and later. Step 4, reframe the task into a tiny 2-minute starter version. And Step 5, return to just that tiny starter version. This whole 5-step sequence is designed to give your slower prefrontal cortex the half second it needs to actually pump the brakes. Broadly speaking, there are 3 main ways to restore your neural brakes. First, reduce the amygdala's threat signal by shrinking tasks down. Make them micro-commitments so your brain doesn't hit the panic button. Second, strengthen your prefrontal cortex signal by protecting your sleep and tackling hard work during your peak cognitive hours. And third, bypass the conflict entirely using the basal ganglia. Basically, design your environment so that starting is just an automatic habit that requires zero conscious deliberation. And here is absolutely the most empowering part of the science: neuroplasticity. Your brain actually changes with practice. Every single time you override that avoidance impulse and start a task anyway, you are actively building stronger regulatory pathways between your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala. You are physically changing the gray matter structure in your brain, literally making the brake pedals stronger for the next time. And for those dealing with severe chronic procrastination, clinical treatments are highly, highly effective. A study from Stockholm University on treating severe procrastination using cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT, found a massive Cohen's d effect size of 1.29. To put that into perspective, in scientific terms, an effect size over 0.8 is considered large. So 1.29? That is a wildly effective result. It absolutely proves that these behavioral interventions tangibly work.
Let's move to and see how this builds over time. Looking at the CBT data, 33.7% of participants were regarded as significantly improved right after treatment. But look at the 6-month follow-up. 46.7% were improved. The benefits actually continued to grow long after the therapy ended. Why? Because the participants had literally rewired their behavioral pathways. It's a real game changer.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a challenge. Your brain isn't broken. It's just running a very ancient survival program. But now, you hold the manual. The next time you feel that sudden urge to reach for your phone to escape an uncomfortable task, just take a pause. Which part of your brain are you going to let win the tug of war? The fast-panicking amygdala or the slow, logical prefrontal cortex? The choice and the neuroplasticity is completely in your hands. Thanks so much for joining me.